Avery, whose show is this? And we're live. Welcome everybody here to the Lakers Lounge podcast, which should have been the host, but I had the wrong intro to it. So we're just rolling along with this being an episode.
Oh boy, here we go.
Of the Lounge. It is a Friday. It has been a week. It has been a weird ass week. I am joined, as always, on these Friday episodes, every other Friday, by Pete Zayas of the Laker Film Room podcast. Pete, how you holding up?
I'm doing well, man. How you doing?
You know, so every so often I'll record a podcast, and it tends to happen either like with you or with Adam or like people like Harrison as well, like people that I've been talking to for a long time, you know, and it happens to everybody when you do this, right? Where you leave the podcast and you're like, fuck, I should have made that point or this point or whatever. But in this case, I made a point in yesterday's show that has been kind of bouncing around in my head. And the question that is spurned by it or comes from it is like spurred by it. I forget. But like, basically it's like, I made the point yesterday that I think there were a lot of people, and specifically small market owners, who were perfectly fine existing in a world with cap circumvention. And I've found a lot of like the finger wagging kind of funny. Like, we would never do that, you know? And it's like, I don't know. I feel like you could have if you really wanted to over the years. Not to this extent that the Clippers have done it or allegedly done it. But like, I was thinking about the system as kind of designed in this new CBA where costs are really controlled. They're limited more now than they have ever really been in the NBA. So it provides the perception of parity and honestly also the results of parity, right? Like we've seen very parodized results. We haven't had a champion make it out of the second round the following year since the Warriors, however long ago. So the results do kind of speak for themselves. But I like the case that I made to Adam yesterday was like, if you're an owner and you care more about your bottom line than you do about winning, you don't really care about cap circumvention, just so long as the costs are limited. And this CBA really like lended itself to that ownership approach.
Doesn't cap circumvention though lead to less revenue sharing for those same owners?
It does. That's fair. But well, so like, it's not even necessarily about the system. Like, I guess like the premise of today's episode actually comes from a couple steps along this process, which if we're moving along from a flawed premise, then maybe this is all moot. But essentially, like, I went from the conversation I had with Adam and about ownership and about the CBA and about a system that I think some owners would have been fine just kind of continuing along. Now it's not, I don't think, going to be able to continue along as it was. I do think they're going to have to like tamper down on a lot of these things. And so like I was thinking about it, and one of the like very pervasive responses to this that I have seen over the last couple of weeks since these allegations have been brought about by Pablo Torre has been, I wish my owner would care enough to do this shit. And it's made me wonder, like, if that is your response to this, I think those fans have been thoroughly let down by their team. I'm a fan of the Minnesota Vikings. I know they will never win a Super Bowl because they don't spend enough. They don't allocate enough resources in smart ways to do it. They exist in a division with like the Green Bay Packers, who like are funded by a city, and yet like this privately funded Minnesota Vikings team can't like overcome that. And it's like, there are times where I'm like, yeah, why am I watching this? I know I'm never going to watch a championship with these guys. I'm a UCLA football fan. And I'm like this season especially, they fired their coach, and I was like, oh, okay, we'll see which cheap guy they get next, and when you feel that let down by a team, it does offer you some perspective on how fortunate we have it being Lakers fans, in that like if like when Mark Walter takes over, or like I've never felt like the Lakers have done wrong by fans with like the commitment to winning, right? I've never felt like they weren't committed to winning in ways that I have with the Vikings and the ways that I have with
Mhm.
UCLA football. And it's made me kind of ask myself this question over the last day or so, Pete. What do sports owe fans? And I'm just like, that's kind of, I rambled enough there. I've been going for 5 minutes already. So I'm just going to throw to you. What do you think sports or teams or leagues owe the fans that follow them?
When you pitched this question to me a little bit earlier, my reflexive reaction was so strong in a sports don't know a shit direction
Yeah.
that I actually am glad that you let me know ahead of time so that I could chew on it a little bit. And
Yeah.
so I could, because I still 87% believe that. The other 13% is I think sports owe fans that they are a meritocracy. Is I think that there is a certain, may the best man or woman win within whatever competitive endeavor that they're in, and that it is an honest, I am trying to beat you at this
Yeah.
type of thing.
Honesty.
And that there is a, no, that it is an honest, I am trying to beat you, and the ref is not paid off in one direction or another. That we are existing on a agreed upon set of terms. That is there always going to be a gray area? Is there always going to be, I'm going to hold on to your jersey where the ref can't see it, so you can't get around this screen type of thing? And not, yeah, of course there's always going to be gray area that people operate
Yeah.
within, people have to police. But I think that that's what sports owe us, is just to be a meritocracy. But to be like, good man, go root for another fucking team, or go, man, you got 2 kids, do something else with your time. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, that's the funny thing though, is that like if I was to just stop rooting for the Vikings, which I've tried, I've sincerely tried. Like I
Do it for
hate,
your children.
huh?
Do it for your children.
It's been a thing that I've
This might
legitimately
be an
tried.
intervention.
I even
Yeah.
tried to like dive into like Rams Twitter for one season, and I've tried doing all of these things, but like I'm so hardwired at this point that like I just know the 1 year, because again, these fuckers hate me. The year that I do finally say I am out, they'll fucking win. They'll win they'll win the freaking Super Bowl, and I'll be like, of course, yeah, the 1 year.
Will you enjoy that?
If I'm out, if I
Yeah.
like, yeah, if I like go out and buy Rams stuff, and like,
Yeah, and then your Vikings win the Super Bowl. Will you
yeah,
take,
no, I would,
joy out of that?
I would laugh at it, because as we've talked about, I'm the guy who laughs as the train runs him over. I would like, it would be the funniest thing of my sports fan life. But like my wife, right? Jen, she's a USC fan, and they tried so hard to win that they had a Heisman revoked, and you had that whole situation there, and the pseudo death penalty that they paid because of trying to skirt the rules of college football, which, by the way, everybody skirts. Somehow SEC teams never get found for doing those things in when they're dominant. But anyway, like it was like there are times where Jen's like, we could just be a USC family. And I'm like, no, that's a
Too
reflection.
far.
Absolutely not.
Sure. You got to have,
And yeah, like there were times with the Dodgers when I was growing up where the McCourts were literally stealing money from the team, and, kind of in a roundabout way from the fans. Right. And even then, like that was at a time where the Angels were pretty good and they were entertaining and stuff. And it was like, oh, I guess I could just be an Angels fan. But even then, it was like, nope, I can't do it. I can't quit these guys. And with fandom, with fandom being a thing that can be so ingrained in people's identity, I do think that sports owe us a certain level of give a bleep. And when they let us down, like I really feel bad. I truly do. I feel bad for like fans of the Charlotte Hornets, and the Atlanta Hawks and the Chicago Bulls, these organizations that are headed up by people who the Miami Heat are facing this too, right? It's a wide open Eastern Conference, and they just salary dumped Haywood Highsmith for the sake of getting under the luxury tax. Like that would drive me nuts. And that's where I think that those teams profoundly let down their fans, because I know how much goes into being a sports fan. I know how much time is taken up by, looking up at lottery odds and who's coming up in the draft and what's our salary cap situation look like moving forward, and, keeping an eye on young prospects on the team and stuff like that. I know how much time is devoted to being a sport, and money too, by the way, right? Adam Silver was just asked about how expensive it is going to be to watch basketball games this year. And it's like, with all of that, that goes into it, and with the way that it can kind of, like, what other things, Pete? I have two kids. When they were both born, I didn't run up, like I didn't cheer the way that I do. It's a different kind of joy, but I didn't cheer the way that I do when the Lakers score like a winning bucket.
Mm-hmm.
I don't when the Dodgers won the World Series, I was bouncing around my house, tears coming out of my eyes, because it was like, oh my God, I never thought I would see this. That's not how I reacted when I had my kids. I had tears coming out of my eyes because I had kids, but that was still like, it's one of those things that, like, sports do things to us chemically. And I just feel like with that amount of power that sports teams have, they do owe us a certain amount of commitment that I don't know that everybody gets.
Okay, can we drill down what that is exactly?
Yeah. Well, what do you mean?
Meaning, I guess. Okay, what do the Charlotte Hornets as an organization owe their fans versus what do the LA Lakers owe their fans? And part of my attraction to the Lakers is that what you're talking about there is written in stone. We are gonna try to be a championship caliber team as soon as possible. That they are going to try to go after the very best players in the world as a matter of practice and appeal to them and try to get them to not just come here but stay and do whatever they need to do to keep it that way. And there's a certain level of, and if you don't execute off of that well enough, you're going to get a bunch of shit from your fans. That I think the Lakers are held to a higher standard than a lot of other franchises are. And I like that. I am attracted to that as a fan, that it is something in a world that I don't think is very much of a meritocracy in a lot of ways, is a place that I do think that it is a meritocracy, right? I think that basketball is a great meritocracy, and what you do on the floor is often reflected on the scoreboard. It's the highest scoring sport, so I think how well you played from one action to the next is very tied.
A little less luck involved with
a little less luck, right? Or like one big play, or one big screw up really changed the game type of thing. That I'm attracted to all of that about basketball. So I would love to just drill down with you. What are the components of what and sports? I don't mean to be pedantic, but framing this through the lens of what do sports owe us versus what does like an NBA team owe us. Like if sports owed me $10, I don't know who I'd ask for my $10 back from. You know what I'm saying? Who's
Steve
the commissioner
Balmer.
of sports? Get it in carbon credits, right?
Go out and plant me 10 trees, Steve.
Well done. So I would love to make it more specific. Give me whether it's a sport or a team. Like, what does your team owe you? That seems like it's more specific to the question that you're actually asking. Is what does a team owe you?
Okay. All right. Well, let's make it sports then. Let's make it sports, and let's go back to your premise of the meritocracy thing.
Okay.
And I think that's a great starting point. My concern there is that it's completely beyond anybody's control. And at any moment that can be brought into question, right? Like that's actually at the center of this Clippers thing right now.
Mm-hmm.
Is if Adam Silver, like if it's found out, and by the way, I think there's more than enough circumstantial evidence at this point for the Clippers to get the death penalty. You know, like
Can
I
you
have felt
clarify
like
what you
that.
mean by that before?
Yeah, well, I think Balmer should have to sell. I think like there's the they have the Stepien rule which says that you have to like you can't trade picks in every for consecutive years. And it says, I guess, that you have to make a draft pick every year, but like they could make an exception to the Stepien rule and make it so that they don't have any picks from now till Kingdom Come.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think Kawhi's contract gets nullified, but still stays on their cap. I think their cap numbers should drop. Like I'm at the point here where it's like these guys do not care. They got slapped on the wrist the one time with the DeAndre Jordan,
Mm-hmm.
and with all of the stuff that we have found out in the last couple of days, it's like everything that we find out, it's like it gets deeper and deeper and deeper.
I have to bring something up before we continue because this has happened a couple times in our conversation already. I feel like you ever like watch a show with a friend and then they keep watching, but for some reason you kind of missed a week or two of it. I feel like we're having that sort of conversation where I am not up on the last couple of days and like you're sitting here reciting like death penalty punishments, and I'm like, you've thought a lot about this. I feel like I've missed some episodes in this series that I am. Or yeah, just tell me where we're going or where we are. I feel disoriented.
Yeah. So basically, over the last couple of days, Pablo Torre released another episode yesterday in which actual Clippers documentation with the Clippers logo on the masthead shows the Clippers as an organization investing into Aspiration LLC. I should have found the graphic, but like there's like a list of the number of times that either Steve Ballmer, Dennis Wong, or the actual Clippers have invested into Aspiration LLC, who was supposed to be a sponsor, which I don't know of too many teams that invest into their sponsors.
Right.
So you have that, and that was, by the way, brought about by a question that Mark Cuban asked Pablo, which was,
I did see this where it's like, wait a second, is Cuban's like, nuts? That's not actually how I would commit this crime. I would actually do it like this. It's like, that is one thing that I caught about this story is Cuban's been fucking cracking me up. So like, whose side are you on, sir? Like,
I mean, my running theory, like gag theory, basically is that he is like the accidental genius detective who's actually leading this investigation.
that's what I'm saying is like,
Yeah.
that was like the hilarious plot twist to this whole story that's the only part of this that I followed this week was that like Cuban just led Pablo right to a very specific gold mine, I guess.
Yeah. Also over it just kind of depends on I don't know what you have or haven't paid attention to, but Dennis Wong, who was the only other minority owner of the Clippers, made a payment to Aspiration LLC for an exact amount that Kawhi Leonard was owed right after Kawhi's camp was contacted or Kawhi's camp contacted Aspiration, asking like, hey, where's our money? And then they got the investment necessary to get him his money. Yeah. So it's like I don't know, at this point it's just so damning. And the part that drives me nuts is how infrequently I feel like it's brought up that Balmer was literally fined for cap circumvention in 2015 for trying to get DeAndre Jordan $200,000 extra, right? So, which, by the way, like if you're willing to get DeAndre Jordan $200,000 extra, what other extra things is he doing to keep, say, I don't know, Ivica Zubats on his books for $18 million a year? But yeah, like that going back to like the notion of meritocracy in actual sports as this kind of unless did I catch you up enough? Did I give you enough information to make you think that was the death penalty is warranted?
I mean, I haven't thought about the punishment enough. I actually think that's part of the reason why I think this is such a significant story is it's like smoking gun term has been tossed around so much that is not, I just don't think, really possible. My question, I guess, recently has been I think it's clear there's something fairly amiss going on, to whatever degree you want to punish that, or whatever degree you think that it is, remains to be seen. But um now what? You know what I mean? And how does this get handled? And if it's not handled punitively enough, what the ramifications of that are, or what does and then conversely, if you want to avoid that outcome, we're making sure this never happens again, quote unquote, death penalty that you're talking about, that's fucking huge too. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And
Yeah.
so I'm not ready to kind of race toward grab my torch and pitchfork on the punishment type phase yet, but I think we need to keep letting the evidence, like, every part of this story has led to another thing that
Yeah.
has led to another thing and more people to it. And so, like, I think we should have a little bit of patience before we come to that. But I do think that, to the broader point of, if there is malfeasance in this, and then what is that, how do you punish that correctly in a way that doesn't just encourage this to happen more and more?
Well, that's part of why I think the punishment needs to be so grave, right? Is that this can't continue on in the league, right? And honestly, we're lucky that the Clippers have managed to suck while they have done this. Like, it's a good thing that it was the Clippers specifically doing this, because they're such a cursed franchise that they were never going to succeed regardless. But like, I think the league got lucky in that there is no championship in question here. There is no MVP in question here. There's just the Clippers, and they have existed and they've been cheating, and we don't have to go and relitigate that success and take away titles and stuff like that. We don't have to do that. So they got lucky there. But if they don't punish them well enough, to an extent where every time a player doesn't take every red penny that he should, we're asking ourselves, why not? Why isn't he? Then that calls into question that meritocracy. And look, if that's where we want to live, if that's how we want to live, then fine. But that is going to be a thing moving forward.
How do we have any idea how frequent or common this is, not just with the Clippers, but around the league? Right? If I feel like these are very unusual circumstances that led to us even knowing about this in the first place. So how easy would it be in this era to get a little bit of extra compensation to this guy or that guy or whatever, and make things happen and not have it get found out? I think it'd actually not be super hard. And then Cuban, like, laying out, like, oh, actually no, Cuban was leaving little crumbs to go follow this Pablo type of thing. Like, these dudes are billionaires for a reason, man, and it's not, a lot of it's not pretty, and
Oh, totally.
they know how to do shit and work the system that expands their wealth and gets shit done. And yeah.
Yeah, I wasn't born yesterday, and I have, pretty clear eyes as to how the world works, almost too clear, Jen would argue. But like, um I still think I've had enough people around the league react in a way to where it's like, oh my God. Right. And not performatively either.
Mhm.
Right. Like, I've had lengthy conversations with people on the phone where you can tell it's not finger wagging. I can't believe this isn't they did this. It's
Sure.
true, like an actual honest reaction to where it's like,
They're
no, this
shocked.
is bullshit. If
Oh,
they,
I Mhm.
so, and so, like, with that kind of in mind, and that's kind of painted a lot of my picture of it. The fact that he's already been hit for it the one time, and again, Pete, how else do you punish somebody, the eighth richest person in the world? Like, what do you do?
This is in the context of the broader things that are happening in the world spectrum. This is such an interesting microcosm of there's a bacchanal going on right now for people with a lot of money being able to sort of do what they want when they want and look you right in the eye as they're doing it. That, yeah, that calls into question, like, if it leads to a level of punitive subjectivity, meaning that if you can punish somebody not through draft picks, or which I do think are the best place to do it. But you can't punish someone with money, because your point is correct. It's like, you could put whatever cap on, this is the maximum fine you can fine an owner, and like, what's that going to be to Steve Ballmer? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there has to
I
be.
think I saw a stat where it's like, if he was to be fined, the max that he could be fined, which is I think like $5 million, like individually,
Mhm.
he makes that a minute.
Right. and so yeah, that all has to be factored in for sure. I also think that these are type of circumstances that they are one-offs enough to where like you can kind of treat it as its own thing in terms of its punishment. And again,
Yeah.
it sends such ramifications throughout the league, whatever way you go, that they're going to have to think long and hard about that. If you're already at that point where you're like, they did this shit, they are guilty to some degree, and thinking about the punishment, I think the punishment needs to be thought about. It can't be a reflexive thing. It has to be really talked out and talked through, of this is why, and this is why to this degree, because I think it has ramifications in whatever direction. So just be as thoughtful as you can about it.
Well, that's funny, because one of the knocks on Adam Silver is he is far too reflexive. He's very reactive, and he's not very proactive. And I actually think that this punishment has to be very proactive, and that you need to set an example. Like, this cannot continue, because again, it erodes at the idea that this is all on the up and up.
And a meritocracy. That's right.
And I think, like, I love that you did offer up that premise of sports owing us that rare glimpse at a true meritocracy. It's why people reacted the way that they did, where we've found out since that they did so somewhat incorrectly, but it's why people reacted the way that they did to Bronny, and why there's such a harsh reaction to Arch Manning out here in Austin right now. In like, people don't like that in this one place where points and points against and goals against and these things, they are all tallied up. And at the end of it, however good you are and however well you played to help your team win or lose that game, that decides how much you're going to play in the next one. That meritocracy is kind of sacred to people.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not commenting on Bronny specifically. I think he's been perfectly fine since he got into the league. Arch less so. Shedeur Sanders is another interesting case study if and when he gets onto the field as well. But like, yeah, this meritocracy, I think, is something that people hold very sacred. I think another thing, Pete, that I've been thinking about too over the last day or so. So we talked about commitment on a team based, in a team sense. I think effort is something that, like, we are owed. And I think that's why people are so angry at how the All-Star game conversation has gone in the NBA, where they keep like trying to redesign the game and introduce all these new gimmicks and stuff like that, when in reality, the solution to the All-Star game is NBA players giving a fuck. like that's and the fact that, like, that isn't the point that is made all the time as one of, I think, the biggest knocks of this generation of NBA player. Like, I think it kind of lets them off the hook. And so, like, that is like, I would say meritocracy, and I would say that we are owed an amount of effort, to where you watch the game and you know what it looks like when a receiver's going across the middle and they get those alligator arms. You know what it looks like when somebody makes a business decision or doesn't take the heave at the end of a quarter or something like that. What do you think about effort as something that we are owed?
I think that's up to the coach. Frankly, from a broader premise, I don't think you can make somebody give a fuck if they don't give a fuck.
Yeah.
I think that's a general truism in life. And if you're in sports, I would argue, though, is that just the merits of basketball. If you are on a basketball court actively not giving a fuck, you are going to be a worse defender. You're going to be worse on offense. You're not going to set good screens. You're not going to run the floor. You're not going to do all of the good things, the things that go into actually being a good basketball player, which when you do give a fuck, you are very capable of, and actually could even be good at those things. But your lack of it means that at the moment you're not very good at it. And so I think that it is somewhat self-correcting within sports that if you're out there not giving a fuck, then someone's about to take your job.
Yeah. Yeah. Even if it isn't the coach, I think the sport, and that's what I mean, is that like the sport should hold a person or player like that accountable. And that's what's so maddening about this all-star thing is like, I remember the force back in the day to effort in the all-star game used to be Kobe, right? He would play so hard that if somebody wasn't playing very hard, it really kind of stood out.
Mm-hmm.
And where's that force now? Where's that presence now? Like, why? Especially like this is where I think like I would have liked to get a little bit more of this from LeBron or Steph or the KDs of the world, to
Mm-hmm.
where they tell the young guys like, hey, by the way, this entertainment here, this event, like this is all part of the package of fandom that we're trying to sell to people that will get them tuned in on any given night. And if they aren't tuned in any given night, we've already seen what's happened with RSNs across the league, right?
Mm-hmm.
In an 82 game season, and how much they've talked about or not talked about cutting the season short because of effort or load management on any given night as well. Like those are parts of it to where, I would like for the sport to self-correct, but I think in some cases we aren't necessarily seeing it. And I think that's why, like, not to get into the ratings argument here on this episode, but like I do think that's why fans have started to check out in the regular season, is because they're like, I don't know who's going to play on any given night. I don't know how hard they're going to play on any given night. And now the commissioner of the NBA is telling me I could just check out highlights or listen to a podcast after, which was, an approach that he could have taken, I guess. What do you think about that notion? And do you think we're seeing that reflected in some of the following of the sport right now?
Yeah, I do. I think you make valid points. I think that the way that it gets corrected is through incentives, though. It has to be incentivized. You keep bringing up the All-Star game, and the All-Star game is low motor because there's no incentive for it to be high motor. The regular season NBA game can have elements of low motor because 2/3 of the league make some form of postseason. 10 teams out of 15 in both
Yeah.
conferences make some version of the postseason where there is no game early on. It's not possible to have a game in November that makes or breaks your season. And there is, I think, more and more of a baseball type of approach to the NBA schedule. From if you go to a baseball game and there's a player sitting, it's not unusual at all to have your utility guy playing or have guys have off days. And that's just kind of how it is because the baseball season is long. When you and I were growing up, it was a regular thing for pitcher to go 7-8 innings. Much rarer now for
Yeah.
that to happen. That there are certain norms that you don't change that whole structure until you change the incentive structure. And so long as you have that many teams being able to like make the playoffs and be able to get to the next level, and then you got the commissioner with that attitude on top of it. Like, I don't know.
How'd you take that response from the commissioner?
Sorry. I took it as we need to make money and we sell each of these games. The way to do that most effectively was to sell this to a variety of different providers, be it NBC, everybody who has their stake in it. And that was our way to make the maximum amount of money to keep this whole league alive. And if you don't like that, you can watch the highlights on YouTube afterward. That's entirely my interpretation. Sorry.
No, I think that's pretty much where I stand too. Actually, where I first went to, my first thought was thinking back to the conversation you and I had just had, I think on the episode previously, about how like TikTok and Twitter, and how that might, like, the revenue generated by those highlights might have to be counted in BRI, and how do you divvy up that pie and all of that stuff. because that is clearly something that the league is targeting. And if I'm the players union, I'm like, all right, if you're telling people to follow the league via highlight, then we better see a cut of those highlights.
That's
So
right.
it's going to be interesting. Yeah, I just really want to quickly, like, the reason that The Good Place is the second dot there on the rundown. Did you ever see that show, Pete? Did you ever watch that show?
One of the
And
rare ones.
what's
Yeah.
that?
That's a rare poll to be like, hey, did you watch this show? And the answer to be yes. So yeah.
It's a good one. It's one of my favorite shows of all time. And essentially, one of the central questions asked was by one of the main characters, Chidi Anagonye, who basically was a philosophy professor, and he, as his kind of grand thesis, and a clip or a video that he recorded that went viral in the universe of the show, was asking people, what do we owe each other? Right? What do we owe to each other? And I kind of like to wrap things up here. We're going to get a little philosophical on this Friday afternoon, but I do want to kind of look at this from the standpoint of, we talked about what sport owes us, and I think we've hit that well. I want to go back to like the team and league and player and fan relationship here, because I just, based on the reaction from way too many fans, not Clippers fans, all 12 of you guys, I anticipated your reaction. You guys knocked it out of the park. But from other fans around the league and fans of other sports who have kind of checked in on the story as well, there were just far too many people saying, honestly, my owner would never do this. And not in like a holier than thou way. It is like, my owner would never pay a little extra to help us win, because he barely pays to the extent that we need him to stay competitive. And like, that response I have found really interesting, because that to me signals that there are far too many teams, and specifically owners here, who are not, I think, meeting the bare minimum of this relationship between fan and team that they root for. And I just think it's too difficult, Pete. You have people who have been fans of teams for generations. You have some people's favorite memories with dad or grandpa talking about the days of the yesteryears of when they got to watch games with their dads and grandpas and stuff. And it's just too difficult to separate yourself from these. I don't even have that generational connection. I can't quit the damn Vikings. So it's like, again, with that in mind, do you think enough teams are meeting that bare minimum, or do you even care?
Yeah, remember at the top of this, I said I'm like 87%. I don't think sports owe us a damn thing, and that it's up to us to devote our emotional resources to the places that can return them most effectively. And that's one of the reasons I love the Lakers again, and why I decided to, like, I grew up very much more like I always love basketball, but I was also really big at baseball, which was my best sport at playing at. I was a pretty good baseball player, and I loved football, right? Grew up in the 80s with the 49ers as a great team, right? And my dad and mom met in San Francisco. They lived there for a long time. They used to go to games, so had a whole crew up there. We would go up to the game, just great memories, But as I've gotten older, like I like the Niners. I live with my dad, who's elderly now, and take care of him. And, that's the thing we do on Sundays is watch the Niner game. And I appreciate that, but it's much smaller part of my fan bucket than it used to be. And then the Lakers went from a fan thing to a job thing. And now and that's part of why I like the Niners, right? I've gotten more into like
release.
Yeah. It's like, I could just be a fan type of thing, And so, but I think that just the natural competitive urge of human beings can come out in so many different ways that if it's supposed to wither away and lose fans, it's supposed to. It's like the world, things change and things move on. That if it's not giving to you, like, why are you giving to it? Type of thing. That I don't think these people care about you nearly to the degree that should earn your lifetime devotion.
But enough about politics. The other thing that I wanted to talk about here is, because, like, So sports is this unique thing that it's one of those few avenues where we can learn while we're not trying to learn, you know?
Oh yeah,
And
great
and
vehicle
so
for
like
yeah.
I have two young kids. Avery starts her third season of soccer on Saturday tomorrow. Ooh, today's Friday. And I love sports as an avenue by which, Avery can learn these things from people other than myself. Like, I think it's really important that, she goes to school and she learns that she has to, you know, pay attention to her teacher and follow those rules and treat her peers and classmates well and respect them and all that stuff. And I think it's good to learn that there. But I also think it's good to learn it on a soccer field
Yep.
and where there is an immediate payoff to, hey, if you run hard on this play, like she scored, I think 3 goals in her last season, maybe 2 or 3. And I remember telling her because she didn't score at all in her first season. And, she was doing it was adorable. I loved
Mhm.
it. Like I'm not, I've had parents who push me too hard in sports. So I'm not going to do that with my kids. But I did tell Avery, it was like, hey, it feels pretty good to score, and her first season she was doing the cartwheels thing and she was dancing out there, and every so often she would really get after it. She's really small, so it's really kind of difficult for her to compete at the level that I think she would like to. But this last season, she did pay more attention and she did run through plays and she did go out there and muck it up a little bit. And her result and her reward was scoring and how great that felt. And I told her, when she scored that first goal, bought her some ice cream and did all of that. But I did tell her, I was like, hey, that feeling that you had there, that happened because you're learning about like hard work and
All the work you
commitment
put
and
in, yeah. Mhm.
consistency. And these are things that you need to carry on in life. And that's at a very low level with kids. But I also think that continues on throughout the rest of your life. Like
Absolutely.
you and I continue learning from sport to this day.
Absolutely. It gives a concrete framework and structure to all these abstract ideas, right? Like working hard and perseverance and having some frustration tolerance. That's one thing about soccer. Y'all don't score so damn infrequently that you got to learn to live with some disappointment sometimes. Or it's also a very physical sport where like she fucking tripped me, right? And you
Yeah.
didn't call anything. And you got
Yeah.
to be able to like move on and keep playing, even though you're pissed off that you faced this injustice that the ref didn't see or something like that. And there's so many great lessons to sports. Like you said, it's a lifetime of, and that's why I've devoted my life, even though I have a very, I care about the world and broader view of the world even beyond sports. But it's the reason I've chosen this as the vehicle for expressing that is that there are so many great analogies and
Yes.
expressions for how we can live in just as people,
Yeah. Well, and yeah, like I want to go back really quickly because you have to get out of here in about 5 minutes. But like, I do want to go really quickly. And by the way, to those of you who left super comments, I'll answer them after Pete takes off. But
Sorry.
the you made that point about how like you care about, and I know this is true about you, but you care about the world in very kind of in a macro lens. You and I have been texting far more often recently about the world than about the Lakers over the last month or so. And yet, like, this is part of why, yeah, I was kind of drawn to doing this, was because, yeah, as fun as it is to celebrate those moments when the Lakers are good, and to be kind of a vehicle for people to come together and celebrate those moments together, that feels good. But it also provides an opportunity, or another, I guess, again, to use that term again, that vehicle to just kind of point out, like, hey, this thing that's happening here, it's happening over here.
Mhm.
And while like we might not want to pay attention to like this Balmer thing is such a perfect thing, we could talk about, and we could talk about like the billionaire trampling on rules and just like this complete disregard for competitive fairness and stuff like that. Pablo actually just spoke on his most recent podcast about how Microsoft was at the center of a controversy that had to do with some of these same things too. And like we can just immediately extend that out to a lot of the things that are happening in the real world. And I know that that's not necessarily what people pay attention to sports for, but it is something that I do think we need to pay attention to. And
My
people
dad
wouldn't if they
sorry,
didn't.
one second.
What's
I'm
that?
so sorry. My dad needs me like right away. One
Yeah,
second.
go for it. Yeah. And so basically the point that I'm making here is that, like, you know, in sports, a lot of people would not pay, as close attention to these other topics unless it was impacting their favorite basketball team. So, like, if you are on the side of, oh, whatever, free market, let these people use their money however they want to use their money, that's a stance that you could take. I'm not agreeing or disagreeing with it. But if you feel that, essentially, if you feel that, like, those people should use their money however they want to use it, and build up whatever power that they get by way of stacking up all those bills, then that's a worldview that you can carry. But once it affects your basketball team, and that injustice, or how unfair that this system would potentially be, where Balmer can just use every penny of his $150 billion net worth, like, if he can use that, and your favorite team can't all of a sudden, well, now you're going to be like, well, shit, that does suck.
It
Maybe I need to
does.
rethink this other stuff, and that's something that I think sports plays an important role in.
Yeah, it sort of pantomimes that same thing that happens in a broader sense, but like the person with a lot of money and wealth and power sort of trampling on other people is a story that's been told many times in many cultures throughout human history. It's not a unique type of thing. And so this is just the different theater, different arena that it plays out in. So, and I'm so sorry about a moment ago. So thank you.
No, you're good. You're good. Pete, I'm going to let you get out of here, though, and enjoy the rest of your day. Anything that you want to plug, with the LFR pod, anything you guys have been talking about recently?
No, man, we just did a mailbag pod today that I've got the juices flowing. We're about a week away from media day. When we come back on Monday, that's where we'll be at. And so just basketball's in the air, and I just can feel it. And in an era where they practice less and less, getting shit right out of the gates with training camp and all that time you do have to practice, it's an important time. And I think we should view it more like that. And then just all of these interesting storylines, they've got more talent, just great stuff. So I'm just excited about the season coming up.
Yeah, the next time you and I get together, I can't wait to, like, have basketball to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
That'll be kind of fun. But yeah, Pete, thank you very much for hopping on. I'm going to stick around for a little bit and answer the super comments, and then send you guys out on your weekend. But yeah, Pete, thanks very much.
Later. Peace.
All right, let's go ahead and dive on into the super chat and play the most important clip on the show, which is a perfect spot for Entel Wild to come on in and say, fuck Boston. I agree. I'll actually start here, though, with let's run with Jason Kelly's question. Silver's got to be mad that he can't control this. Normally, the journalists report whatever Daddy Silver says. Access journalism isn't journalism. Yeah, that's been a really interesting development throughout all of this. And if I had more time with Pete, I think he would like to weigh in on this as well. But essentially, one of the things I've been really surprised by is how ill-equipped people at the center of this story have been for, like, something a lot, because this still isn't full-on journalism. Like, full-on journalism would have been, like, nailing the story to the point where there wouldn't be any further development in it and no further follow-ups, unless, like, the league investigated it and the story developed further that way. It's tough because, like, Pablo has talked a lot on those shows about how he felt the need to go live with the information that they had because they had a deadline and they were concerned they were going to be scooped on this. And that's obviously always been a part of journalism. Um, but it's also like, when we are now 2 weeks into the story, and part of this story's development have been almost, I don't want to say performative, but uh you know entertaining updated releases of information that have almost been winking to the people who have been paying attention and reading between the lines. Like, that was one of the things that I've talked to Harrison and Adam about, is this notion that, like, when the first episode dropped, I was like, oh, he's got more. This is going to be part of a series. There's going to be the follow up to this no matter what, that would kind of examine the reaction to the story. But I just don't think, I didn't think at the time that was enough for that to be the entirety of the story, and still go live with that amount of circumstantial evidence. And so it's just like, all right, let's see when the next bit of evidence is going to drop, and then let's see what the next bit of evidence is going to drop. So this has been a little more on the side of entertainment than it has been kind of classical journalism, which, like, I understand, got to make money, and this has probably made Meadowlark and a ton of money. But yeah, like, even within that construct, the extent to which people have been ill-equipped or ill-prepared for somebody asking the follow-up, that, like, you guys have, I'm sure you guys have felt this, where it's either watching me interview somebody, or you'll be watching a press conference, and or a scrum after a game, and there'll be a question that, like, everybody on Twitter is asking for the beat reporters to ask the coach, and it just doesn't get asked. And the takeaway after that is, well, they can't ask that question because they got to be careful, because they got to maintain that relationship with the coach. And that is part of it. Like, that's a balance that you have to strike in being a reporter and in being a journalist. Um, and yet, like, it still can, and it still does frustrate the audience to be like, there's a question in bright lights above you that needs to be asked. Why is nobody asking this? Why is this player playing more than this player? Why aren't we asking about why this player is playing more than this player? And I think a lot of people at the center of sports and at the centers of society have gotten used to the fact that people did need to maintain those relationships, so as to continue the store forward, and so as to continue to lean on that center of the story, and be able to tell a version of the story with that person or with that entity's input. And it's why, frankly, documentaries have gotten worse. Sports documentaries especially have gotten worse. They're all commercials now, if they involve the central character. So, or if that central character is actually sitting down for an interview. The Last Dance was a big ass Jordan commercial. It was fun. It was entertaining. It got us through a really tough stretch where we didn't have any sports, help get us through that. But at the end of the day, it was a commercial. Um, and I think we have now arrived at a point here where we're starting to see through that stuff, and some of that content where superstar X signs off and is willing to participate in it, that stuff isn't trafficking quite as well as it used to, because it's just not as interesting. And I think, you kind of look at the way that Adam Silver has been kind of blindsided by a lot of the new reporting on this stuff, the way that Mark Cuban has been kind of blindsided by the new information that he is apparently guiding Pablo Torre accidentally to. Like, you look at the reactions to Pablo Torre just asking the follow-up that we're all basically begging for people to ask when we watch these pressers, and people are kind of surprised by it and ill-prepared by it. And it should, I hope, serve as a reminder to journalists everywhere of the job that they should have been doing all along, that I think a lot of journalists have kind of like slipped away from. I'm not classically, I'm an English major. I didn't go to school for journalism. I didn't go to journalism school. I didn't do any of those things. And so, like, maybe I'm not the absolute best person to kind of, make some of these points, but still, we can tell what access journalism looks like when we see it, Shams, and when we see it, we got to point it out. I'm going to continue to, note that ESPN has devoted a lot more airtime to Jonathan Kuminga than to the Clippers recently. That seems interesting. Who's being protected there? So, yeah, I think that's a great question, Jason, about all of this. And I think it's really important that we continue to note those things as they happen. Let's go to another question here from John Drake, who asked, could Kawhi get banned or suspended? Ooh, I'm going to leave that up. That is a great question. And I'm of the belief that he should be. Like, one of the defenses of Kawhi to this point is, well, what if Dennis just acted completely on his own? And it's like, okay, but let's say this thing, Lakers Lounge, grows to a point where I have employees and an employee does something, that is directly somebody who answers directly to me, who gets walking orders from me. If that employee does something that is illegal or unethical or any of those things, in a way that paints the company in a bad light, eventually questions have to be asked about me, right? It's like when with the Dallas Mavericks, when they went through their scandal of improper behavior on the part of Mavericks employees and leadership. Mark Cuban tried the whole defense of, yeah, I'm sorry, everybody. I'm not able to see everything at my company. And it's like, that defense doesn't really work, Mark, when you pride yourself on being the most hands-on owner in the sport, and you pride yourself on your attention to detail and all of the ways that you are constantly monitoring your team to make sure they are running at the absolute optimal level. You don't get to say that you do all of those things then, but then somehow miss your direct, the people who report directly to you, acting in a way that paints the Dallas Mavericks in a very negative light. And that's kind of where I am with Kawhi, where it's like, okay, yeah, maybe Kawhi didn't directly sign off on these things, and maybe Uncle Dennis was acting in unethical ways, but Uncle Dennis did still represent Kawhi in these conversations and negotiations, whether it was aspiration, whether it was with the Clippers or with the Raptors or with the Lakers. Uncle Dennis was making those requests, and at some point, Kawhi's got to ask, like, "Hey, you're keeping things on like a little on the up and up, right?" And for so many teams, for the Raptors, who, by the way, like, the owner's response to in 2019, when Kawhi signed with the Clippers in the first place, the Toronto Raptors owner at the time was like, I thought I circumvented the cap to a pretty great extent, and even that wasn't enough. And I was willing to do all of those things, and even that wasn't enough. And so for that to be the response, like, what did Kawhi get from the Clippers? And for Kawhi's camp to even put the Clippers in that spot, like, some of that has to reflect back on Kawhi Leonard. He did, like, the fact that Kawhi didn't participate as a in endorsing the Aspiration LLC at any point, like, nor did he tweet about them or like a tweet or anything like that. Like, he's got to know that that's a no-show gig, and for him to receive 4 times or upwards of 4 times more money from Aspiration LLC than Robert Downey Jr. and Leonardo DiCaprio and all of those other celebrity endorsees combined, like for that to be the case, and for you to never show up, and for you to like for the only thing that would make that that contract terminable was that you don't play for the Clippers. Like at no point did you ever think like that's a little weird. And I'm sorry, like you don't get to play dumb in that spot. Kawhi isn't a rookie. He's been in the league long enough. So I do think he should probably be suspended. Also, for the sake of like whoever signs Kawhi Leonard on the minimum this year, it's going to have an immense um, advantage over the rest of the team that they probably shouldn't have. I think he's probably going to have to sign with Brooklyn to recoup whatever money that he loses after he, if his contract is nullified. But yeah, I just think we I think far too often we kind of patronize professional athletes. At this stage of his career, Kawhi Leonard is well over 30 years old. He's been around the NBA for plenty long enough. He has left the San Antonio Spurs. He has left the Toronto Raptors. He has now been with the Clippers and re-signed with the Clippers long enough. He's been involved in enough negotiations to know what is on the up and up and what isn't. And I do think that Kawhi should probably also be a subject. I think Joe Smith was also suspended. I think Kawhi should probably get maybe not the full Joe Smith punishment, but some kind of punishment. And by the way, that's just for this. I still think they have to go back and look at 2019 and what it took to sign Kawhi Leonard in the first place. So if we find out all of that stuff, and like if we find out what we find out from this situation, and they go back and look at 2019, that would make it really tough for me to just feel like Kawhi is just innocent bystander over here. All right, that is going to do it for this episode of the Lakers. Well, no, this is the Hook. So thank you everybody for tuning into the Hook this week. We will be back in 2 weeks' time to preview and react to some of the stuff that we're getting from training camp. We will be back on Sunday to answer mailbag questions. So get those in the form of a 5-star review on Sunday. And until the next time you guys hear from me, have a great rest of your weekend. Make somebody else's, and I'll talk to you then. Have a good one, everybody.